All right, y'all, I've got like 2:02. You ready to get started? Everybody good? Okay, so you probably all know the drill by now. You've probably been to a professional development session, but just in case, we are recording this session. We're live streaming it to Pittsburgh and Harnett. So we do have the microphones on. I am recording, so anything you say, just know that you're being recorded. It will be available on my Blackboard site, probably the first of next week. I have to do some editing. I'll put it up there. So if there's anybody that wanted to come today that couldn't make it, tell them the Professional Development Blackboard site. It'll be under the Fall 2016 Training Series calendar. And we have Mr. Ken Hoyle here today, the VP of Student Services. Is that right? Okay. And he's going to discuss the Ferpa Act. And I asked him before this, I said, just remind me what Ferpa stands for. And I know that sounds horrible, but that's why I'm here. And it's the Federal Educational Rights and Privacy Act, even though I want to call it family. But he's going to take us through it today, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask him. Yes?
Does recording this follow FERPA guidelines?
Mr. Ken, can you answer that?
It is, because it is done by the institution for the institution's benefit.
There you go. See, that's why we have the guru in the room, because I don't know. And we do have participants on Pittsburgh and Harnett campuses, so I'll be monitoring them in case they have questions. But anyways, I'm going to turn it over to Ken, and let's congratulate him. Thank him for being here.
Well, thank you, Dacia. Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here. We'll talk about something that is near and dear to everybody's hearts, especially if you're in the student services world and in the continuing ed registrar's office, and that is student records and students having access to these records, what they can and can't be used for. To reiterate what Dacia just talked about, FERPA is a federal law. And I'm going to show my age here. I like to do that for Amelia. Does anybody remember on Channel 4 the show Fire in Line, hosted by William F. Buckley?
That was long before my time.
William Buckley's brother, James Buckley, was a senator from the state of New York. He was the one who introduced and got this bill passed. Sometimes you see it referred to as the Buckley Amendment. But, as she said, it's Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and it was established to control student access to their educational records and who can see them. And like anything else with the federal government, it's got to have an agency to oversee it in the Department of Education and enforce it and make sure that all the participants like us are in compliance. And so that is the Family Policy Compliance Office, which is in Washington. All right, FERPA provides 4 basic rights. And they seem very simple, but like anything else, applying these things all over the 50 states and so many institutions of higher education can make it kind of tricky. But the first thing is the student has the right to inspect his or her records at their request. The law says, well, not the law, but the FERPA office with the Department of Ed says that you have 45 days maximum to respond to such a request. Usually it doesn't take that long, but you have that long to do it if you want to. Then the student has the right to challenge what is in the file. They can just inspect the accuracy. If they see something that they object to, that they do not think is accurate about them or about their performance, they can file an amendment to that. Then we have to include that in the student file. The third, this is the big thing, and this is what we're really going to be stressing today. They have to give consent to disclose these records to another person or to an outside agency. And the fourth and final one is they can file a complaint if an institution is not compliant with these requirements. We're all members in Student Services of the American Association of Admissions Officers and Registrars, and they do some research every now and then, and they send us position papers. Hey, and they did a study about 4 or 5 years ago, and they studied, sent a research team out, and they found out that the number one thing where schools were out of compliance with FERPA was in this area right here. That was the consent and disclosure of these records, which is kind of a no-brainer. Most people are trying to be customer friendly. Most people are trying to be helpful. You know, a student comes in and says, can you do da 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 da? You want to do that, you want to help the student. Sometimes you're not supposed to do that. So that's how most people get out of compliance. Very few do it intentionally. All right, this is a very important point that we have to make here. When do the FERPA rights begin? FERPA, they talked about in the legalese about an eligible student. A student is eligible for FERPA rights when they turn 18 years of age or when they enroll in an institution of higher education at any age. Let me go over that again. You know, when you go from high school and you're under mama and daddy's umbrella and everything, and they're taking care of you and your education and your rights and everything, you are now eligible to take care of yourself with your records starting at age 18. Or if you're like a Lee Early College student or a CCP student, and you're 16 or 17, you automatically are under FERPA at that time, the minute you enroll in an institution of higher education. And this is a blanket for anyone who's in higher ed. The curriculum students, the Con Ed students, the high school kids taking things through CCP, the Lee Early College kids, or the people who are just taking a class as a special credit student. They all are covered by FERPA.
Now, is that just for their records with the college, with the higher education institution?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, if you're a CCP student, your parents go over there, they can see whatever they want over their high school. We have the right to transmit information without their consent to the high school, which we do. You know, it goes on their transcript also when we teach them curriculum class. And the parent can get the information from the high school. But we, as an institution, cannot tell that to the parent. The important thing to know is there is information there that is basic information that the government defines as directory information. They give us some leeway, they give all institutions some leeway to define what is directory information. This is what they call PII, personally identifiable information. It's not a part of that. This is stuff that we define as your name, your major, your enrollment periods, your hours earned, degrees awarded, and honors received. So if people out here, Cody called to say, did Johnny Smith, he's applied for a job here, did he get a degree in accounting there 2 years ago? We can tell them. If a student said, hey, you put my name in the newspaper for making the dean's list, I didn't give you permission. We can do that. That's an honor received or an award. Not that that ever happens. Mostly I get the complaint is you left me out. But these are the things that are not identified to you specifically as an individual that we can release without their consent. Now, there are people that don't want anything at all released about them. Sometimes that's a situation in a domestic violence situation or a bad marriage, and they can write me and say, I don't want anything released to anyone about me. And when that's the case, they have to give it to me in writing, put it in the file downstairs, I look up their schedule, and then I write the faculty and say, look, Susie Smith doesn't want anything released at all. Just be aware of this. and we will honor that for a whole academic year. Doesn't happen very often, but it sometimes does. All right, now, who can you release information to without their consent? The first thing is, this is a very, I'm sure Jamie Wicker knows about this, is a very famous passage in educational research. School officials with a legitimate educational interest or need to know. And there have been oodles of lawsuits to define what is a legitimate educational interest and what is a real need to know. For example, if you say, did you hear about Bill Smith? I told him last year he was found cheating in Ty Stump's class. Isn't that bad? Well, that's not an educational interest. Now, if Fred Fritz wants to talk to another math teacher and say, you know, I taught Bill Smith and he now wants to take Calculus 1. He made an A in my class. He ought to do fine in your class. That is an educational interest because you're talking about something that is relevant to his registration or his instruction or his performance. But things that don't revolve around guiding the student or instructing the student don't meet this test. Now, Dr. Marchant will call me frequently and say, I was at the Rotary Club and so-and-so said his daughter has had to take biology 4 times. Can you check on that? Tell me what her GPA is. Is this really happening? Should we let her take it again? My boss is asking a legitimate question there about a student. I'll print him a transcript and take it to him. That meets the test. Okay. To authorized organizations conducting studies to improve instruction or to accrediting bodies. SACs, we can release information there, which I'm sure that's being done as we speak right now since we're going through that process. The First in the World grant. A grant has been done with our students to give a report on how we can instruct better, how we can advise better, how we can counsel better, something like that. That is okay. Now here is a very interesting kicker. We can release information to the parents of dependent students who have provided their tax returns as verification. I've always told parents, you know, it's a lot easier to just tell your son or daughter to sign something rather than say, here's a copy of my tax return. But the federal government said that if they provide their tax return that meets IRS guidelines that shows that he or she was a dependent on that tax return, we can release that information to that parent without the student's consent. I've never had that happen, but it's there.
Is that the basic information or any information?
Any information. All right. Every now and then I do get a subpoena. A subpoena or summons that trumps Ferpa. I have to release that. Yes, Jamie?
I just want to make sure that is not our burden to determine. Any request we get, or if a parent were to walk into my office with tax records, I need to have them contact you.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's not, you're more likely to get an issue about, why won't you tell me this information, lady?
Yeah.
And then you say, well, you can talk to Mr. Hoyle about that.
Yeah.
I've never had in my years in student service a parent come in and say, here's my tax return. You know, I want to now know what my son is doing in Western Seal, whatever. You know. But we just have to tell them it's allowable if they want to do that. But most people just let that go. But that's a good point. They're not very unlikely, but if they were to, you can just say, here's Mr. Hoyle's number. We'll take care of it. Responding to a health or safety emergency. This is another exception that waives off FERPA. If a student, if you were to contact me and you say, this girl is passed out in here, I've got Frank over here, we have a real problem, whatever, I can call EMS, I can tell EMS she's in room such and such, she gets out of history at this time, blah, 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 I can say anything. You know, if the individual also is just requesting directory information like we talked about previously, we don't have to talk to the student about that. Or if a student chooses to go to the registrar's office and files a release of information and identifies to whom we can release the information or to what organization we can release it, we don't have to speak to the student about that because we have that waiver on file. And I sometimes get this question. They'll say, you know, this is a ninth student, the registrar's office was closed, what can we do about that? All they have to do is take a sheet of notebook paper and just write out, I hereby give my consent to release my records to whomever. Sign it and turn that into us, we'll honor that. It doesn't have to be fancy at all.
An exhibit slideshow.
There you go. Thank you. All right, speaking of parents. All right, here at the post-secondary level, parents have no inherent right to inspect their son's or daughter's educational record. The right to inspect rests solely with the student. Now, I know that's a tough pill to swallow to a lot of parents. Because if you have not heard it, I will promise you this, you're going to hear it. I'm paying his way. I carry him out there, he lives under my house, whatever. I want to know, blah, blah, blah. And I always tell parents, I fully understand where you're coming from because I have a child in college. You better believe when he went off as a freshman, I wrote one tight binding release form. If anybody's interested, I have it saved on my computer, I'll give you a copy. I mean, I can know everything about what color shoelaces he's wearing on a certain day. But this is what the law says. The right to inspect rests with the student, not the parent. So, back to what Jamie was saying. You've got enough to worry about, especially like at Harnett and Chatham, Barbara Jeans with her clinical folks or whatever. If someone is giving you a hard time saying, you know, I need to know this, and I mean, we want to work with them as much as we can, as far as the law will allow. But it's just better, and I don't want to put you in a bind because you're working with that student as an advisee or your team. Just give them my name. I'll take care of it, and I will do as much as I can.
I appreciate that. It is much easier when I can just say that.
Oh,
I mean.
Let me call you.
You know, you have a different role, and you're out there working with them on a day-to-day basis. And so, if you just refer that to me, I'll take care of it. But it's nice to be able to tell them, I'm in your same shoes. I got a college student, so I know all about this. Much like what we were talking about with the health and safety exception, you know, we do have some students who are having some issues, and this is really for the faculty. You know, we are authorized by legal precedent to work with mental health providers, work with EMS people, work with students, physicians, or the family if there is an issue about that student's health. And so if you have an issue like we were saying earlier, you can call security, you can call the people in the admissions office, the counselors there, you can call the success coach, you can call me. And if you have an issue like that, the courts do not want FERPA to be used as a shield to protect records to someone's physical detriment. don't use FERPA to say, gosh, I really wish I could tell you where she is, but the law won't let me do that. We have a green light to do anything in terms of that. Email records are kind of a moving target. It's kind of settled down in the past 4 or 5 years. A lot of gray area here. And when I go to admissions officer and registrar meetings, there are still different camps with different philosophies on this. There are some that say, you know, I don't know who's at the other end of that email, so I won't respond to them. And then I have other people just say, well, you know, they're a distance ed student, they're working with their faculty member, it's okay. So kind of the compromise, so to speak, with distance ed being so popular now in hybrid courses, and we have decentralized registration, we really have to work with email. And you know, email is state property, so we can have access to those anytime we want. So the recommendation is registration email records where somebody may write like Fred and say, yeah, I don't want to take algebra this semester or whatever. Please put me in a humanities course instead. They recommend that you retain that email where you say, okay, I'll put you in humanities 110. Keep that for 1 year by the end of the term. And speaking of, you know, some meetings there, the Department of Education was finally, they put in a ticket order with them, with their help desk, asking, please give us some clarification on that. And what they said is, you know, if you have email messages between faculty and staff that are identifiable to a student, then such a message is that student's education record. In that situation, the student has the same right to inspect and review the email message as any other of his educational records. So like if Billy read Cassie and said, you know, I really don't think he needs to take the radio broadcasting course this spring. I don't think he's ready, da, 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 da. That is an educational record that that student has a right to read. Now, if Billy were to write that student and say, hey, I need to see you after class, okay, there is nothing, they may be talking about the Carolina game. There's no proof there that it was anything about his or her educational record. So they call that a memory jogger, and that's a sole possession record, which means it's a dead end thing. An objective person would look at that and say, I don't know who he's talking about, what they're going to do. Probably had nothing to do with education. This isn't often, it's what the Department of Ed is saying, but it can exist. Like I say, if you're not actively talking about your instruction, or their registration, or advising, or their records, then it can meet this criteria where you really don't need to worry about it. Now, some things the faculty do need to be aware of. The Department of Ed and the FERPA compliance folks do not like in any way, shape, or form posting of grades. It's just something, of course, we don't do it out here that I'm aware of. I haven't seen any in years. When I first came to work out here, she was kidding me about how long I've been here. I think they did some of it, but quickly it went away. Because I remember when we used to use Social Security numbers as the student number, which is not a good thing in today's world, and that's why we don't do that. But posting of grades is not good because the grades are not directory information. He hasn't given you consent to do that. Even if they were to, it would not be good because it would be very easy for people within the class to track who it is who made that 98. Oh, it's that guy who sits up front who makes all the A's. So that's not in compliance. And then letters of recommendation. There's some guidance there. You know, now if Fred were to, one of his students finished in college transfer and wanted to go to medical school, we could do a letter of recommendation. And if he were to just write, she was in my class, very bright, participated all the time, perfect attendance. Well, I don't know if you need to say that. Just said she was super wonderful, great student. You would not need consent. But if he were to write and say, she finished out here with a 3.75, she made A's in each one of my math classes, while working, and and you give that personal information like that, then you would need to have on file a consent form that they authorized you to do this and to whom it goes to. And once you've done that, you need to keep that on file.
I have a question about the grades, the posting of grades. I've not seen it done here, but I have seen it done at another institution where they'll take the student's student ID number and use that with the grading, but it doesn't have any first, last name. It's only the student ID number. Is that considered a violation?
It's not. What they say is it's not recommended. The problem there is they say that anything that you use to disguise a student's information needs to be known only to the student.
Okay.
Like if you were to say to the class, you make up something, like you said, Green Turtle 101, and Green Turtle 101 made a 95, only you would know you made a 95. But if I were to put 6774, people in the registrar's office and an advisor down the hall could look up, if they have a little knowledge there, and figure out that number with, like, using an algorithm or something. It would be a lot of trouble, and a lot of people wouldn't do it, but that's why they don't advise doing it. But they won't slap your hand
Gotcha.
on that, but they just don't recommend it. We just don't go there. All right. When I was in school, I learned the most by doing things, learning by doing. That's what we need to do here with some scenarios. And that way we can already put your FERPA knowledge to the test here. All right, so a parent calls and wants to know if his son has been attending class regularly. If you haven't got that, you will get that question. Can you respond? Without the release form or the proof of the dependency status, you can't do that. It gets kind of hairy, what we were talking about earlier. If it's an early college student, or if it's a high school student, then they're going to come back and they're going to say, well, he's in high school. You have to say, I understand that. But I teach sociology. I teach algebra. I work for the college. I can't disclose that. 16-year-old student enrolls in your class and parents want to know her grades and participation. If they remind you that she's a minor, they're the parents, can you tell them? No. If you teach over at Lee Senior, you can talk all you want. But if you work here, School of Higher Education, no you can't. All right, this would be like Sarah Hofforth with the First in the World grant. Handling a grant for your institution for first-generation students studying math. Can you request non-directory names, email addresses, grades, GPAs, and other information for these students? Yes, you can. Because that grant is being done in-house and is for the benefits of the students here. We're trying to improve the way we teach mathematics in this example here. Also, about 2 years ago, I got a request. The system office was doing a study. I think it was with developmental students. I think it was in your math area or something. And I had to turn in a whole lot of information to the system office on that. And I remember some people saying, can we really do that? I said, yes, they can request this because this is part of the system. The registrar's office receives a summons for a copy of your class roster of your seated Psych 150 class that meets at 10 o'clock. Should they release it? Yes. Anytime that we're subpoenaed, no questions asked. We've got to turn that over. Now, I have done this before I have been subpoenaed because a husband or wife wanted to prove that their estranged spouse was not where they said they were. And I have been subpoenaed for that, and I provided that to the court. I have gone back and I have told that student, just letting you know, your records were subpoenaed. Just as a courtesy, I wasn't required to do that, but I just let them know that, you know, you had no say-so on this, I had to do this. All right, a special credit student is taking history class during the summer semester on an audit basis. Does Ferpa apply to the student since their credit will not be transferable? Yes. What the government says, as long as an institution is maintaining a record of the student taking the course, you have educational records on that student, and it has to be controlled and access denied to certain people, and they have to give consent, just like if they're taking it for credit. The student wants copies of all materials in their student file in the registrar's office, plus all material their advisor has on them in their advising file. Is this permissible? This is allowed, but it is not required. The government says they only have a right to inspect. If they say they want copies, we can provide copies, but the government says we can also assess a charge for that. Casey, one time we had a vet med student who was denied admissions because she had entered the program, I think 3 times, where she had a file about this thick, and she wanted to inspect her records. She went, we set her up in a room, had somebody from the records office sit with her. She went through every page and made notes and everything, and then wanted a copy. We said, we will make you a copy, but we assess 10 cents a sheet. The government says that's fine, because we aren't required to make the copies. All right. Any questions? Any stories that you dealt with? Or really, you think you've heard it all in terms of this area, but you haven't. I mean, every day there's a new thing. If you haven't been approached by a spouse or a mother or a father about educational records, you will be. And if you have not had somebody get testy with you about the fact that you won't release, it's going to happen. Like I say, leave your burden with me. I'll take that on. Have a nice day, just like you can, while you get back to teaching. But there are numerous law cases that are coming up all the time, and they are tweaking things within Ferpa. Didn't want to get into them because you just need to have a basic understanding of it. But I subscribe to an update, and there are challenges of, what is the definition of an educational record? What is the definition of consent? And things of that nature. And they'll tighten it or they'll expand it, tweak it from here and there. But basically, if you run into an issue, just pick up the phone or send me an email. I'll be happy to help you with it.
Did we have any questions in Pittsburgh? I see there's a lot of people there.
If you have any questions, ask Rhonda Jones.
That's right, we got it.
Okay.
Everybody good? Well, let's thank Ken for doing this session. And like I said,